If it's Thursday, Washington prepares to ring in a new era as President-elect Trump is named Time Magazine's Person of the Year, talking about his day one priorities as challenges overseas threaten to overshadow his agenda at home. Plus, new evidence against the suspect accused of murdering a top healthcare CEO as a top Democratic senator speaks out, saying the explosion of public outrage should be a warning to the healthcare industry. The controversial comments ahead. And demands for answers. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle want to know where the mysterious drones reportedly spotted flying across New Jersey are coming from, who's controlling them, and why, as national security concerns mount. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington. It is full steam ahead for President-elect Donald Trump and his agenda, with just weeks until he's sworn into office for the second time. This morning, Mr. Trump rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, flanked by members of his family and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, after being named Time Magazine's Person of the Year for a second time. Time described Mr. Trump's political rebirth as unparalleled in American history and writing that he has remade American politics. In brief remarks this morning, the president-elect struck an optimistic tone for his incoming administration.
I think we're going to have a tremendous run. We have to straighten out some problems, some big problems in the world. When we left, we didn't have any of these problems. We didn't have Russia with Ukraine. We didn't have Israel October 7th. We didn't have the Afghanistan disaster. We didn't have inflation. We had no inflation. And we had a very strong economy. And we're going to do that again. But I think we're going to even up it because now we have experience that we didn't have.
In speaking to Time about the priorities for his next administration, Mr. Trump repeated some of what he told me in our recent interview, including that one of his first acts of his presidency will be to pardon January 6 rioters and backing down from his campaign promise to lower grocery prices. He also reiterated what he told me, that any potential prosecutions of his political opponents will be up to Pam Bondi, his pick to serve as Attorney General. And when it comes to some of those, the president-elect's more controversial cabinet picks, the pressure campaign for Mr. Trump's MAGA orbit appears to be working, with even Mr. Trump's embattled picks seemingly gaining momentum.
Do you feel like there's a pressure campaign against people who even throw out concerns?
I do, and I think that that's a two-edged sword. I think that you could run to a point when we have thin majorities to where you could, I think that it's more important to get behind closed doors, address concerns, and have Republicans come together as one than to create controversy.
Nothing new about that. Every senator has got to vote their conscience. My presumption is to vote for presidential cabinet choices. I do that almost all the time.
But beyond the Beltway, global challenges could threaten to overshadow Mr. Trump's domestic agenda. In the interview with Time Magazine, Mr. Trump, similarly to what he told me in our interview, would not explicitly say whether or not he's spoken with Vladimir Putin during the transition. Remember, President-elect Trump has said he could end the war in Ukraine even before he takes office. And on the Middle East, where Mr. Trump has threatened there would be all hell to pay if the hostages in Gaza were not released by Inauguration Day, Mr. Trump didn't rule out the possibility of a war against Iran in his second term, saying, quote, anything can happen. And of course, there is the continued fallout from the fall of the Assad regime, where in a dramatic development overnight, an American man was found after spending months in a Syrian prison. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel joins me now from Damascus, Syria, where he spoke with that rescued American earlier today. Richard, extraordinary developments. Tell us what your takeaways are.
Well, this was a bizarre story, and Travis Timmerman basically went on a religious pilgrimage that ultimately brought him here to Syria and brought him into the hands of the Assad regime. We spoke to his family. I spoke to him earlier. We've pieced together a timeline, and it is a strange one. So about 7 months ago, he told his family that he was going to be traveling in Eastern Europe, Prague, Hungary. They lost communication with him at that stage. They thought maybe his phone had been stolen. He went to Lebanon. Then from Lebanon, He said he was reading scripture. He was interested in the Bible. Seems to have been a very, very devout Christian. He told me he spent 3 days in the mountains between Lebanon and Syria. The mountains form the border here. And that he crossed into this country illegally on foot as part of a pilgrimage. And I asked him, was this like following the footsteps of Jesus, the apostles on the road to Damascus? And his answer was he heard the voice of God. Once he entered the country, he was arrested. Assad was still in power. They interrogated him. They thought maybe he was some political activist. He said that they determined that he wasn't, but they just kind of left him there in prison. He says he wasn't beaten or mistreated. He was just kind of stuck in a cell until Monday. And then on Monday, everything here changed, obviously, in an instant. The rebels took over. They started breaking open the prisoners, freeing political prisoners. He was also freed, but didn't know where to go and was found today wandering the streets by a Syrian man. I spoke to him as well. He said he saw this foreigner barefoot, kind of limping down the street. He gave him water, he gave him food, brought him into the house, and he was then taken care of by the rebels who are now in charge here. Some journalists, we were there. Some aid workers were looking after him. He was remarkably calm. He said that he had time while he was in detention to meditate and find solitude. So this was someone who was here for a personal journey, and his personal journey got mixed up with the harsh reality of Middle Eastern politics. Now he's free, and the rebels are quite happy that he's free, and that they're still looking for the other American journalist, Austin Tice, the freelance journalist who's been missing now for over a decade.
Richard, just a remarkable set of circumstances, and you talk about the broader backdrop to all of this. You've been on the ground there in Syria since the Assad regime fell. Describe the reaction that you're seeing, and also the real concerns and uncertainty about how things move forward in Syria.
So we could talk about this for the next 6 hours, Kristen, and I think we're going to be talking about this all year. The map of the Middle East is being redrawn right now. I mean, just look at where things stand now to where they were a year ago. Gaza is in ruins. Hamas is still hanging on, but it was effectively destroyed. Gaza is now unlivable. Israel has destroyed Hezbollah. By destroying Hezbollah, it's created opportunities to have a Lebanon without Hezbollah. By removing Hezbollah, which was propping up the regime here, the rebel movement, which had been fighting against and losing the civil war against Assad, was suddenly reinvigorated, was able to move in, exploit the situation, topple the dictator. Russia was busy in Ukraine, didn't prop him up, only gave him a safe passage and an asylum in the country. And now this country is coming to terms with this very different reality. Without Hezbollah, without a dominant position in the region, with rebels who are Islamist, who are their leader was once an Al-Qaeda faction. Now they're promising moderation. They are so far acting generally with moderation, but this is still a city in transition, and a city where you can see where sometimes the lights don't always work.
Well, and it speaks to the fact that it is a city that is going through a remarkable transition. Richard, you've been there covering every minute of it. Just incredible reporting. We will look for more of it tonight on Nightly News. Thank you for joining us. Please stay safe, my friend. It's always good to see you. Thank you. I now want to bring in our panel, NBC News correspondent Garrett Haake, who's covering the Trump transition, Betsy Woodruff-Swan, Politico national correspondent and an NBC News contributor, Naveen Nayak, president and executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and Matt Gorman, former senior communications advisor to the Tim Scott presidential campaign. Thank you all for being there. Garrett, let's start domestically before we talk about some of the foreign policy that Mr. Trump will be facing when he takes office. Today in the world of President-elect Donald Trump was a pretty good day. He was there in the New York Stock Exchange. He was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Time Magazine marking what it has been an historic political comeback.
Yeah, and I think for somebody like Donald Trump, who is such a product of like the 1980s and 1990s, seeing himself on a Time Magazine cover is a big deal. But, you know, kidding aside, it is a remarkable turnaround from someone who was exiled from Washington essentially a few years ago and carved out of the broader culture, if not the entire political culture, to be back on a kind of grocery store newsstand publication like that in such a clear-cut way, I think is a remarkable capstone to the year that he had, in which he proved to be almost quite literally bulletproof, and now kind of back in the culture in a major way that I think we're only just starting to see. He's been a little quiet since the election. I don't think he's going to be quiet for much longer.
It doesn't seem like it, Betsy. It seems like we're starting to see the beginning of more interviews, more public appearances, and it seems like there is a collective, to some extent, willingness to give him a little bit of space in this moment.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're seeing that in a dramatic way from Republican senators who almost entirely across the board are refusing to say just about anything that could be remotely construed as negative about the nominees that he's put forward, including former Democratic nominees that were very powerful roles. Of course, Tulsi Gabbard to run the Office of Director of National Intelligence. That's something that privately makes so many Republican senators so uncomfortable, but you are not hearing them go public with that because the president-elect has more political power than he has ever had in his entire career. And of course, RFK Jr. is someone who historically has supported abortion rights. The fact that he would run the Department of Health and Human Services, which plays such a key role in medical care, is something that in general would make Republican senators uncomfortable. But again, right now it looks like both of those nominees are in really good shape to get confirmed. And it just speaks to the extraordinary political clout that Trump has at this moment.
You're absolutely right. And we are hearing from a number of Republican senators he should have the picks that he wants. Matt, let me ask you about some of the comments he made to Time Magazine that are getting a lot of attention. Of course, one of his key campaign promises was that he's going to bring prices down. I asked him about this in my one-on-one interview. I said, can you guarantee that's going to happen? He said, I can't guarantee tomorrow. Similarly to Time Magazine, he said this, if the prices of groceries don't come down, will your presidency be a failure? President-elect said, I don't think so. Look, they got them up. I'd like to bring them down. It's hard to bring things down once they're up. You know, it's very hard, but I think they will. It's a different message than what he campaigned on, which is the prices will come down.
I think you're right. And, like, look, he's learned his lesson also from the Biden campaign where they said it's going to be transitory. They've tried to spin it. Now you could see him trying to set the groundwork a little bit for what it'll realistically look like when he takes off. I think he's trying to tell a little bit of a story here. The last thing he wants is for expectations to be super high. Then all of a sudden we're going to have, $2 milk or something like that. And when it doesn't happen, things not go the way he wants politically. I think he's trying to set a foundation here. I think more than anything else, we talked about this the other week, Kristen, he views so much of this as negotiation, right? He's setting the table and a foundation for expectations in the mind of every American voter and in the press before he takes office.
Yeah, Naveen, take us inside some of your conversations with your fellow Democrats right now. What are folks saying? As Betsy points out, President-elect Trump has an immense amount of power because Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, obviously very narrow majority in the House. But what are Democrats saying about what they can do, what they can accomplish in these next 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, listen, at first, I think one of the biggest differences, President Trump has a unified party that didn't exist in 2017, right? I mean, it's hard to remember. It was Speaker Ryan back then who didn't agree with him on much, and Mitch McConnell. And so I do think there's a really different divide here where the Democrats are trying to find themselves, figure out where they go from here. And the other party, for now, stays really united. I think, Leader Schumer has shown that I think there's an opportunity to be patient here. Let's see if Republicans can actually hold this together. The president made a lot of big promises, including lowering prices, and it doesn't matter what he said. It's what the American people expect. Inflation continues to be very sticky. The numbers this week were not great. And I think, who's going to have some latitude? He won this election. But I think the American people have shown that they're very impatient, that they are still frustrated with these things. And there are no solutions. If you look at everything on their agenda, none of it involves tackling inflation.
Yeah, Betsy, it's such a great point. And you could argue it is one of the biggest anchors that President Biden and then ultimately Vice President Kamala Harris had as they were running for election.
And not only are there no solutions, some of what Trump campaigned on is likely to raise inflation. Mass deportations, if that actually happens the way he's promised, that's going to hit grocery prices so quickly because so much of the agriculture sector relies on the work of undocumented immigrants. And of course, tariffs. If you dramatically jack up prices on all imported goods, that's going to make those goods more expensive for consumers. It's almost a truism to say that. So the proposals he put forward in this space are going to make it really hard for him to deliver on his campaign promises. Of course, one big thing that he will have going for him is a totally deregulatory approach to energy. This idea of drill, baby, drill is something he's going to lean into so hard. And that naturally could lower prices just because when energy costs go down, costs for everything go down. It's a lot of different moving parts. We don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot Trump controls. There's a lot he doesn't control. But this issue is going to be huge going into the midterms, and it's going to be complex for him.
This is my pet issue during the campaign, though. There is more oil and gas being produced in this country right now than in any other country in the history of the world at any time. And so his ability to dramatically increase production in the kind of way that could bring prices down is going to be extremely limited. There are steps he can take. They can be showy, but in terms of actually cutting costs in a significant way, most energy economists and experts don't actually think that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, and part of what he's laying out, he's being quite murky about. I mean, to this point, I mean, how does he, in fact, lower prices when he's proposing tariffs? And as Garrett says, oil and gas production is already so incredibly high.
I think the easiest way is, right, you want to stabilize prices and raise wages so it seems a little bit like the prices are going down. I think that's the easiest way. And the other part of this is when you talk about tariffs, again, I keep going back to this thing. He views it as a negotiation, right? We saw the Trudeau and Sheinbaum thing, kind of little two-step over there before, right? How he approaches when he, both now in this interregnum before he gets office, and then when he takes office, how he negotiates a deal that really was his USMCA redone will be, I think, very telling.
Yeah. I was smiling because actually stabilizing prices and raising wages is what Biden did. Right?
How'd that work out, really? How'd that work out for you?
That's what I mean. But that has been the story of the last year. Is like prices have stabilized. They're still much higher than 2019, which is why Biden got punished. But wages have gone up. I don't think that's actually going to cut it for Trump. The promises he came in on were really dramatic. I mean, take an issue like housing. That is probably one of the biggest pain points for voters right now. There's not enough housing. It's not affordable. Trump has nothing. Republicans cannot agree on an agenda to address the housing crisis that is happening around this country. And I think that's going to, catch up with voters realizing they're not actually solving these problems.
That's another one in which mass deportations could cut the wrong way for him. It's a lot of folks who are building homes in this country.
Yeah, good point. Let's talk very quickly about foreign policy, Matt. It's going to loom very large over his administration. Richard Engel in Syria, Ukraine. Trump very choosing his words carefully about whether or not he's spoken with Putin. Boy, did I get him to try to tell us. Still didn't get an answer. Time magazine didn't get an answer. But talk about how you see these foreign entanglements unfolding.
I think you're going to see a new paradigm a little bit because I think, as Naveen points out, right, our side is very united that there's going to be less kind of push internationally, right? Especially with J.D. Vance being a voice in the room, especially on Ukraine. You're seeing certainly not Trump parroting Vance lines when it comes to like really going kind of hard and pulling back hard, but talking about an agreement there. And the same thing with Time Magazine, too. They pushed him very hard to talk about Vladimir Putin. He didn't go there. He's being a little bit murky. But one other thing I thought was very interesting, too, and it kind of alludes to what Richard Engel said, he really did point to the importance of October 7th to really how that changed the region fundamentally. And as we're seeing, as Richard pointed out, the domino effects of that.
Absolutely. Very quickly, Naveen.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's two tests here for him. One is order. He's promising a sense of, order, and I think that is going to be a lot harder than they recognize. And the other is he really putting America first, right? I know the American people have some concerns with Ukraine, but just capitulating to Putin is not actually going to be what the American people want. And the threats for our allies are going to continue to mount.
And, of course, so notable that he has not ruled out the possibility of pulling out of NATO. Guys, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation. Garrett, Betsy, Naveen, and Matt. Really great stuff. Coming up, a new report on the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The Justice Department watchdog reveals what the FBI did right and what missteps it made leading up to the riot. Plus, the very latest on the healthcare CEO's murder and its ripple effects, including new outrage and threats directed at the healthcare industry. We will discuss that. You are watching Meet the Press now. Stay with us. Welcome back. A just released report that says the FBI missed a, quote, basic step in intelligence gathering ahead of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. According to the long-awaited review from the Department of Justice Inspector General on the attack, the FBI failed to canvass its field offices for intelligence ahead of the events of January 6th. Joining me now for more on all of this is NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. Ryan, thank you so much for being here. Talk us through the report. What are your key takeaways?
I mean, essentially, that canvas of all of the field offices across the FBI really could have gotten some important information because, as we now learned through this process, a lot of those field offices did have good information about January 6th, and including some from their own confidential human sources, from people who were scouring the web. And, you know, all of us were online, right, at that point, and we knew that this was sort of something that was gathering. So it's always been this big question of why the FBI failed. And I think part of it was just the time period they were dealing with. It was over the holidays, right? So that's part of it. So maybe not everyone's putting their best foot forward, but this was definitely a big failure, I think, by the FBI not getting all that information together.
So what happens now that this report has been released? Will the FBI now take steps to prevent these types of failures or lapses from happening?
Yeah, I mean, this was a unique circumstance because it was the FBI under Donald Trump, and who wants to sort of upset the big boss? I think that was one of the issues here. They couldn't really issue these reports ahead of time saying that, hey, all of these things he's saying about the stolen election are actually going to cause some problems down the line, and we're seeing a lot of rhetoric because of it. You kind of have to pretend as though, you know, there's not politics in the room, even though you can't have really honest discussions even within the FBI about what the sort of threat level that was creating.
Such an incredibly challenging moment. What do you know about the status of some of the investigations into those who have been accused and convicted of attacking the Capitol? And we should note that President-elect Trump, both in his interview with Time magazine and his interview with me, said that one of his day one priorities is to issue pardons for those who attacked the Capitol.
Yeah, I think the interview was really fascinating because you looked at what Donald Trump had sort of consumed about this and, you know, what he was sort of saying. And what I've been talking to a lot of Trump allies, and a lot of them are concerned that he doesn't really know the level of detail in these individual cases. And, you know, because there are a lot of people who have been convicted of violence and it's on videotape and you could play it on the air, right? So it's this little bit of a challenge, I think, for them down the line, potentially, that this could backfire on them, potentially in the midterms, if they end up pardoning so many people and not going through the details of these cases. So we really don't know how far those pardons are really going to go, and whether it's just going to be the misdemeanors or whether he's going to go and pardon people who really did some really vile acts of violence that day.
All right. Ryan Riley, great stuff. Thanks for your reporting. Appreciate it. And thanks for joining us. Turning now to the case against the 26-year-old man charged with murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Police say the impact of the killing resembles a domestic terror attack.
When we are concerned about terrorism, it is in part because of outsized impact of a particular act of violence. This one has all the hallmarks of something that is going to inspire and contribute to a contagion effect.
Now, police add that wanted posters have been spotted in New York City showing the faces and names of other healthcare executives. It is unclear if the posters appeared before or after Thompson's killing, but it is clear the murderer has become a grim rallying point for a torrent of anger directed at the healthcare industry. In fact, health insurance employees nationwide say they are on edge. They're worried about their own safety, reporting threats in the wake of the killing. This week, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is facing some backlash for comments she made to the Huffington Post and NBC News about the public anger. Look.
When you turn this into the billionaires run it all, is they get the opportunity to squeeze every last penny.
Yeah.
And look, we'll say it over and over. Violence is never the answer. This guy gets a trial who's allegedly killed the CEO of United Health. But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
We need regulation, in part, to rein those guys in.
Now, Warren later clarifying her remarks in a statement to the HuffPost saying, quote, violence is never the answer, period. I should have been much clearer that there is never a justification for murder. Meantime, police continue the murder investigation. The suspect is resisting extradition to New York, filing a petition alleging unlawful incarceration in Pennsylvania, where he remains in jail after being denied bail. Joining me now is Joanne Kennan, journalist in residence at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and contributing writer for Politico magazine. Joanne, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Let's dive right into this. The NYPD Deputy Commissioner for Counterintelligence is raising warnings of a potential contagion effect from this killing. What about this murder do you think has prompted that level of warning?
Well, people are really, I mean, I think that we underestimated how, we knew people were mad about healthcare costs, but clearly they were madder than many of us had understood. That, you know, there's a lot more people in the country who have insurance. I mean, the Affordable Care Act did achieve a significant expansion and who is covered, but being covered doesn't mean you can get the care you need when you need it. People get hit by bills that they didn't expect. They're afraid to go to the doctor sometimes because they're afraid they won't be able to afford it. The whole, you know, access is more than having insurance. Access is actually being able to get care when you need it, and that your doctor decides, you and your doctor decide what you need, not the insurance company second guessing the doctor. In fact, there have been reports where it's not even their algorithms. I mean, it's just sort of automated that some of the insurers just sort of have this formula and kaboom, 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 no, no, no. And people then can't get covered for things that they and their doctors or their loved ones believe they need.
You know, I've been talking to people in the healthcare industry. They say they are shocked, they're scared. They are also paying to the online attention and anger that has been posted since this shooting. What are the implications of the public outcry that we are seeing, despite the fact that there was this horrific act that we are also seeing investigated?
The outrage at insurers have sort of overwhelmed. If you look at the comments online, sort of the anger is really torrential. And you know, how insurers are going to respond to it. I mean, the answer is not just going to be more bodyguards for executives. There's exactly what the insurers do to sort of try to sort of mute this anger, to not be, they need to be seen as the people who are paying for your care, because you are paying for your insurance, not the people who are denying your care. Now, I don't mean that every insurer denies every piece of care that people need. Clearly, many people are getting medical treatment, but there's enough anger that this murder tapped that I don't think you can put this back in the bottle. I mean, exactly how will the insurance industry self-police or change or communicate? It's not just a matter of communicating. They have to do something better because this anger is really, I mean, I've covered healthcare a long time and we've seen these ups and downs. You know, there was that movie like 20 years ago where, you know, the working mom couldn't get care for her disabled child, and the audiences in the movie theaters cheered. Some of your viewers will remember that, some may not be old enough, but there's a difference between cheering in a movie theater and somebody actually killing somebody in the street. So this is some kind of pivot point.
You do take me to my next question, because we are seeing this heightened political rhetoric all across the country after, frankly, several high-profile acts of political violence. How does that weigh into, how does it contribute to something so horrific happening as we saw as this killing of this healthcare CEO?
We've seen more violence against medical providers in general. We haven't seen anything like this, you know, a hit on the street, but we've seen both. There have been some shootings in hospitals over the last couple of years. So it's not just the insurer, and there have been attacks on doctors and nurses, and there's been more violence in the healthcare workplace than we are accustomed to. I mean, there's a lot of violence and anger and division in our society. So this, in some ways, is a manifestation of this, you know, outrage and anger and sort of fury. It really is fury that is, it's not just at insurers, but I think insurers, you know, you might be mad at your doctor, but you're still getting care from your doctor. I think it's easier to be mad at the insurer who's actually, you know, when you seek medical care, it's because you're sick, right? You are vulnerable by definition when you need an operation, when you need, when you're ill, when you're injured, when you've been in an accident. So you sort of take that anger on top of sort of this political climate that you're talking about, and it's really volatile. I mean, but I don't think that. Do I know exactly how the insurance industry is going to respond? None of us know that yet. But this is not going to just pass as like, okay, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. Something is going to have to change. But it's hard to, Congress doesn't regulate. There's a mix of who regulates insurers of state and local state and federal, what's private, what's Medicaid, all that stuff. There's no the government can't really just say, you have to pay everybody's back surgery without second guessing anything, right? Not absolutely everybody needs back surgery. So there's not an easy fix, but I think that this, I was just talking to some colleagues today about how does this change things? I don't think we know yet, but it has to change something because we can't be in a system where people are so distrustful of healthcare that they end up, that it becomes not just violence, but he became a folk hero, that he's being cheered on, and something has to give.
Yeah, it's just one of the incredibly disturbing aspects to all of this. Joanne Kennan, thank you for your perspective on this story that we will continue to cover. We really appreciate your joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next, growing mystery and growing frustration as lawmakers on Capitol Hill push for answers. I'll talk to a New Jersey mayor about the mysterious drones reportedly spotted across his state and why no one seems to know where they're coming from. We'll delve into all of it. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The mystery surrounding reports of drones being spotted over New Jersey is now the focus of intensifying scrutiny on Capitol Hill, with lawmakers from both parties voicing frustration over the lack of answers from federal officials. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he's getting a classified briefing on those reported drone sightings today. It comes as New Jersey and New York's senators wrote a letter to the Homeland Security Department, FBI, and FAA demanding a briefing as soon as possible.
I'm quite dissatisfied by the response by Homeland Security, FBI, and FAA to my request that we need to have answers. They need to know where these drones are coming from. And we cannot simply say, well, they're not causing any harm. Well, do we know that? What are they doing? And who's sending them?
Dozens of drones have been reportedly spotted over New Jersey since mid-November. Witnesses say some are as large as 6 feet in diameter. At the White House briefing today, National Security Communications Advisor said that there is no evidence that these sightings pose a national security or public safety threat, and that the FBI and DHS have not been able to corroborate any of the reported sightings. I'm joined now by Sam Morris, mayor of Mine Hill Township, New Jersey. He not only reported witnessing one of those drones flying over his community, but actually recorded a video of it as well. Mayor, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you for having me on.
Well, great to have you here to talk about this really bizarre case that we're all trying to get to the bottom of. The White House says the FBI and DHS can't even corroborate any of these reported sightings, that they're actually drones. What's your response to that skepticism that these are drones?
Skepticism of these being drones is nonsense. The FBI, no one in New Jersey that I know of other than maybe the governor's office has heard anything from the FBI. But this isn't the FBI's ball. This ball belongs to Michael Whitaker at the FAA. He's the administrator of the FAA. This is his ball. This is his problem. My understanding is above 50 feet of elevation, the FAA is in charge of all airspace. So while the FBI is supposed to investigate crimes or potential crimes, the FAA should actually be out investigating this. And to date, there is zero, as far as I'm aware, zero response from the Federal Aviation Administration.
Well, and we're looking at some of the video that you shot on our screens right now. Talk to us about what you have seen, what your constituents are telling you they've seen.
I'll give you two examples. So last Tuesday night, I took the video that you're running. It was taken at 10 Baker Street, which is our town hall. I had a resident call me that they sighted drones over our municipal and school complex, which is all in the same block. I came around here as fast as I could. And by the time I got here, I see what you see in the video. And on that one black fence, that shiny black fence, you can see the drone reflecting off of that fence back there. You see it right in the bottom right corner. So that video is what I personally took. And if you see on the right, there's a stationary right there. There it is. There's a stationary drone. And to the left are the drones going back and forth in a zigzag GPS pattern. That was taken by me. The other one that I couldn't get, but it was this morning, about 5:15, my neighbor 2 doors down, her name is Donna, she called my phone until it woke me up. It was on vibrate and said, Sam, there's a drone right over your house.
Wow.
So I got myself together. I went out on my deck in the back of my yard, and the drone was about 1/8 of a mile to the northeast of my house. I couldn't get my camera to focus because there were trees between me and it, and they were focusing on the trees. But those are, and then I have multiple pictures in my phone that I didn't even bother sending. But for them, this basically says because they're skeptical, they're not going to do anything. And now we're going to demand that they do something, or they tell us that they're not going to do anything. But to say the FBI says they have no credible, what do they call it, and they couldn't substantiate this, is absolute, I'm sorry, it's absolute garbage. I'm going to invite them all to Mine Hill. Come on out to Mine Hill. We can come out one evening about 6 o'clock. I'll have some cocoa for you, and we can come out and you can look at these things till your heart's delight.
Mayor, what is your biggest concern, and what is your message to the FAA and federal officials?
I have several concerns, but my immediate first concern is the size and weight of these things. If there was a malfunction of one of these devices, they are going to hurt someone. They're going to come down and hurt someone. Even a drone that's 2 or 3 pounds, if it was 70 to 150, 200 feet in the air, is going to hurt someone if it comes down. Some of these drones, they're saying, are 100, 200, 300 pounds. They're very large.
Wow.
So that's my immediate concern, that we have something flying over our head that can just fall and hurt us. My message to the FAA is do your job. Their job is the security of the American people in the skies. Whether you're inside an aircraft, a 747 going between 2 cities, or you're under these aircraft, whether they're manned or unmanned, the FAA is responsible for our safety in and under the skies. And to date, they are not doing their job. That's my message to them.
All right, Mayor Sam Morris, thank you so much for your time, bringing us your video and your perspective. We really appreciate the information.
Thank you very much for letting me be heard. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Coming up next, Steve Kornacki will be here. He's at the big board to show us why the race for governor in an historically blue state could be an early test for whether the gains Republicans made in 2024 are here to stay. He'll break it down. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Donald Trump won the presidential race by gaining ground with multiple Democratic groups. Hispanics, Asian Americans, Muslim and Arab Americans all shifted in his direction. But will those voters stick with the Republican Party when Mr. Trump isn't on the ballot? That will be a key question moving forward, and we could get our first answer pretty quickly. New Jersey, where Mr. Trump did 10 points better in 2024 than he did in 2020, will elect a new governor next year. And that race could be an early test of the strength of Trump's coalition. Steve Kornacki joins me now from the big board to break this all down. So, Steve, what are you looking at in New Jersey?
Yeah, Kristen, you set it up well. We talked about this, obviously, in the aftermath of the election. Trump doing so much better with non-white voters, with non-traditional Republican voting blocs than we've seen from Republicans in the past. And what that meant was outside the battleground states, in big, diverse blue states, Trump made his biggest gains. You mentioned New Jersey and that 6-point margin. It had been 16 in 2020. That's what Trump had lost the state by. He got it a lot closer in 2024. And so obviously the governor's race, which is an open seat race, wide open primaries in both parties. We don't know who the candidates are going to be yet, but we do know what this Trump coalition looked like. And there's the question, whoever emerges as the Republican candidate, can that candidate do some of the things Trump did in New Jersey? Because let me take you through them. They're pretty dramatic. Take a look here. We're looking at some of the cities and towns. This is Perth Amboy. Why are we looking at Perth Amboy? The highest concentration of Latino voters anywhere in New Jersey, 81%. And look at this. In 2016, Perth Amboy voted for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump by 64 points. That Democratic margin came down to 44 in 2020 and all the way down to single digits this time. That's a shift over 8 years of 55 points in Trump's direction in the most heavily Latino city in New Jersey. Take a look at Lakewood Township. The population here, about 140,000. That is growing dramatically. It was about 60,000 at the turn of the century. Now, 2024, you're up to almost 140,000. Is a very large Orthodox Jewish population here. This is a majority Orthodox. It's been a Republican town for a while, but again, look at this. Trump won it by 50 in 2016. 8 years later, this election, it's a much bigger town now, and Trump won it by 75 points. So more growth there for Trump. Palisades Park, this is 48% Korean American, the highest concentration of Korean Americans anywhere in the country, any city in the country. 48%, basically half. And again, look at this. Hillary Clinton won here by 32 points over Trump 8 years ago, down to 22. And this time, Harris beat Trump here by only 5 points, a 27-point shift in this heavily Korean American community toward Donald Trump. And then take a look here. This is Island. Now, what's significant here is Indian American population. Little India is the section of this town. It's called Little India. It's about 50%, about half Indian American. And again, Hillary Clinton easily won here over Donald Trump 8 years ago. Biden carried it by 26. And look at that. That Democratic advantage virtually eliminated this election. 1/10 of 1 point. That was Harris's margin over Trump. So, again, these are some of the sort of micro examples of what happened across New Jersey to make the state so much closer this time around. It was the second biggest improvement Trump posted in any state in 2024. It was in New Jersey. This is what powered it. Republican running in 2025 statewide New Jersey. Can they do this?
Yeah, helps tell the tale of why President-elect Trump did so well. Steve Kornacki, we really appreciate it. We know you'll keep your eye on New Jersey. We miss seeing you every day, but appreciate that breakdown. Thank you, my friend. Thanks. Still ahead, the age-old question. Younger Democrats challenging more seasoned colleagues for powerful roles as committee leaders and upending the party's traditions in the process. I'll talk to one of the members looking to shake things up next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As Democrats prepare for the second Trump administration, we're witnessing something of a changing of the guard in Congress. Younger House members are mounting challenges to their more senior colleagues for the top spots on key congressional committees, and it's looking like some will be successful. 77-year-old Congressman Jerry Nadler stepped aside as the top Democrat on the powerful House Oversight Committee amid a challenge from 61-year-old Congressman Jamie Raskin. Politico reports New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is poised to become the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee, edging out Virginia's Jerry Connolly, who's more than twice her age. And it's an open competition for the top role on the Natural Resources Committee after Congressman Raul Grijalva announced he's stepping down in the face of a challenge from California's Jared Huffman. But Grijalva is backing New Mexico's Melanie Stansbury as his successor, a fellow member of the committee with less seniority than Huffman. And joining me now is New Mexico Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
Why do you think we are seeing this, what some are calling a changing of the guard in Congress?
Well, you know, we're right in the midst of a big generational change in our overall Democratic leadership. We have the most amazing team right now after we had an extraordinary and historic team of leadership over the last decade. And I think many members who have been elected over the last, let's say, 5 cycles, you know, are extraordinarily talented. They're ready to serve. There's things they want to do. But I also think we're facing a perilous time as the Trump presidency is gearing up. And so I think many of our members really feel strongly that we have to have the strongest team, the best people, and the best leaders in those roles so that we can fight back and continue to serve.
To what extent do you think some of the criticism of President Biden is playing a role in what we're seeing on Capitol Hill? The fact that some folks felt like he may have stayed in the race too long, the fact that they feel like that ultimately played a role in Democrats losing?
I don't think that that has anything to do with the current congressional races. Most of these races had already begun or been considered before the presidential election. And so, you know, each of our members have different perspectives on these things. I'm a huge supporter of President Biden and of Kamala Harris. I spent many, many months on the campaign trail. But, you know, I think as a woman, I will say this, that the loss of the presidency has really impacted me and my willingness to step up and run. I really felt the call last week when I was asked by Raul Grijalva if I would consider it, because in the 220 years of this committee, there has never been a woman in charge of it. And so the time is now. The American people are hungry for it, and I'm up for the job.
And what do you say to those who say Jared Huffman has more experience? He's the better choice. How do you answer that?
Well, both he and I think in many ways have similar experience. He's been serving in Congress for the last 12 years. I've been serving in Washington, D.C. I started with the Obama administration in 2010. I've worked in the White House. I worked in the Senate. I served in the legislature. I'm also a ranking member. But also, I think I bring a different brand of leadership. I think that my brand of leadership is really rooted in communities, working with tribes, working on environmental justice, working at the forefront of these issues. And also, I think, you know, I've been serving under Jamie Raskin in the Oversight Committee, and I'm excited to bring the model of leadership to natural resources where we really fight as a team and we get things done where we can on a bipartisan basis.
My NBC News Capitol Hill colleagues talked to a Democratic official in the Biden administration, and they said, quote, going into Trump 2.0, there's not going to be tolerance for having members not up to doing these jobs. Do you think there have been folks in House leadership who haven't been up to the task?
No. I mean, I think that, you know, one of the things that's beautiful about our caucus is that we have people of all ages, all backgrounds, all capacities. And I think everybody who comes there to serve fully shows up with their whole heart and all their grit and all their determination. And I just think that as we're facing the Trump administration, we have to have well-oiled committee machines, well-oiled leadership machines, and that we have to know how to serve the American people in an effective manner. And there's a lot of talent out there, and there's a lot of people in our caucus who are putting themselves out there, and I think it's beautiful. I mean, that's what the American people want. That's what democracy is.
Let me have you respond to something that President-elect Trump said about energy. This was today in Manhattan. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
We're going to be ahead of AI. We're going to be way ahead of AI, and we've got to produce tremendous amounts of electricity. You know that. It's unbelievable when you think that we need more than twice what we already have. We have Lee Zeldin in charge of the environment. He's going to be giving us very strong approvals, I think, and he's going to make sure everything's good and clean and proper, but he's going to give us very fast approvals.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump is certainly no energy expert. We'll all acknowledge that. But, you know, he's made clear that he wants his energy agenda is drill, baby, drill, take us out of the Paris Climate Accords, and to destroy the tremendous manufacturing and clean energy progress we made under this past Congress and the Biden administration. And I think it's going to be bad for the American economy. It's going to be bad for climate change. And, I mean, he has put already nominees that he's put forward we know are bad for the environment. And I mean, it's not wrong that we need more technology and we need more electricity and energy, but the way you go about it can have really damaging impacts for the planet and our people.
What realistically do you think you can do that Democrats can accomplish in the minority?
Well, first and foremost, we're going to have to fight back. You know, I think the American people are looking for courage and backbone and grit, and they want us to fight back against what we know is going to come. They're going to try to fire federal officials. They're going to defund programs. They're going to take us out of these big, especially climate and the energy space agreements. But I think the American people are also looking for us to do things that are actually productive. You know, they want to see us working where we can in a bipartisan way. They want us to continue to pass legislation. They want us to pass budgets. And so I think our job is both to defend against the bad, but also to continue to demonstrate every single day that we're showing up for the American people. We're going to fight like hell for them. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that their lives are better as a result.
Let me finally just ask you a political question. President Biden carried your state by double digits in 2020. Vice President Kamala Harris won it by 6 points this year. Why do you think that is? Why the erosion?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of postmortems about what happened in the election. And I think in the last several days, we're even seeing new information coming forward of the very sophisticated communication strategy that the Trump campaign had. So I think it's hard at this point to really fully understand what we were up against. But certainly the data tell us that the American people are unhappy and feeling the impacts of a difficult economy. And so we got to make sure that we're continuing to address those bread and butter, meat and potatoes issues.
All right, Congresswoman Stansbury, thank you so much for stopping by. Great to see you in person.
Great to see you, too.
Really appreciate it. I am back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. The news continues with Yasmin Vesuvian in for Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.